Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Jason Davis here with you, Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. We are live, as always, here in the morning on the East Coast. It's morning on the West Coast, too. It's not morning if you live in England or in Europe in general. Not morning there. But it is morning here, which is why we're called Soccer Morning. Coming off of a international friendly day yesterday, the United States losing to Ukraine in that game in Cyprus, which was supposed to be in Ukraine and got moved and blah, blah, blah. We'll certainly talk about that game today. Open up the phone lines for anybody who needs to vent a little bit about what a poor performance that was from the United States. Clearly, no one on that field. You'd make a tough case to say that anybody on that field who wasn't already on the plane, sort of accepted to be in the roster already, made their case to get on the plane to go to Brazil or the chopper. I guess around here we say get on the chopper because that's what Jurgen Klinsmann pilots. He pilots a helicopter. Get to the chopper. That's what he does. Oguchi Onyewu getting a return to the U.S. men's national team there in central defense, right next to a youngster, John Brooks, the Hertha player who is full of potential, but is clearly not ready for that stage. Clearly not ready to be a full international at that level. And I think there was some hope. I mean, maybe not Oguchi Onyewu, who, by the way, let's not. Just because Oguchi Onyewu is on the backside of his career, it may not be the player he once was. That doesn't take anything away from the service that he's provided to the United States men's national team over the years. I mean, the guy's a legend. Just for the Borghetti picture alone, he's a legend. But clearly past it. John Brooks, clearly not there yet. There was a very interesting juxtaposition, those two guys working together. The very experienced but physically limited Oguchi Onyewu, having gone through his injuries and just age and mileage, and the physically gifted, athletic young player without any of the experience, John Brooks. And it led to two very simple, very easy Ukrainian goals. Tim Howard did what he could. Made the saves. Boom. Put right back in. And for the second one particularly, has to bother you as a U.S. fan. Just look, again, Brooks and Onyewu aren't going to be the guys on the field in Brazil. But it has to bother you that neither one of them seemed to figure out they needed to get to the line to try to keep that out, with Howard sprawled 10 yards from his goal line. So we'll take your calls on that front. It doesn't have to be USA-Ukraine, by the way. We're certainly here to talk about the rest of those games as well. Mexico-Nigeria playing to a scoreless draw in front of 68,000 people in Atlanta last night. I watched some of that game. An entertaining game despite the scoreline. I thought in the portion I watched, I thought Nigeria was the better team. I didn't watch the entire game, and I'm not going to make any broad statements about where Mexico is. And in light of the fact that the United States went to Cyprus and laid an egg against Ukraine, and I don't know that it means a whole lot, I'm not sure that this game meant a whole lot either, although obviously a much fuller roster for Mexico than the United States had in Cyprus. Chicharito Hernandez came off after 45 minutes, I believe, maybe picked up an injury. I have a question from someone on Twitter we'll get to eventually, from Arthur DeCamp, about the situation of Josie Altidore, clearly struggling at Sunderland. It's not going well. He's not scoring goals, getting dropped by Gus Poyet for League Cup finals. And the plight of Chicharito Hernandez, who is a part-time at best player at one of the biggest clubs in the world, a club that is struggling right now. And then because they're struggling, I think that has something to do with the limited playing time for Hernandez. So we'll ask the question later. Which is the better situation? I don't know. Or the worst situation. I think he may have said it like that. Later on this show, Dave Clark from Sounder at Heart will join us. It's MLS kickoff in a couple of days. Season starts on Saturday. So we'll get Dave on the line to discuss the fortunes of the Seattle Sounders in 2014. Expectations always high in Sounderland. How high are they going to be after last year's how do we describe what happened to the Sounders last year? Certainly they went through a rough patch. How concerned are you about Clint Dempsey if you're a Sounders fan? It's not going well. It didn't go well at Fulham during the loan. He's going to come back. Confidence at an ebb. He didn't look that great against Ukraine yesterday either. Now, I think that's a function of the rest of the team looking like crap. The fact that that Jones and Kljestan couldn't seem to control the midfield. Kljestan in particular wasn't great. But if you're a Sounders fan, you're paying that guy a lot of money. Now, as a fan, this is an interesting question. Should fans be concerned about how much money a player is making? Only if he's not living up to that contract. Only if he's not giving you any value for it. Because this is a salary cap league. And Clint Dempsey is impacting your salary cap. As a DP, most of his salary is being paid by the team. And it's not hitting the cap. But a large portion of it is hitting your salary cap. And you want to see, look, he came in with fanfare. Clint Dempsey's returning to MLS. He's going to be a Seattle Sounder. He's going to make a difference. They're going to go on and finally get that championship. I know they haven't been around that long, but finally get that championship that they've seemed destined for since they entered the league in 2009. The questions around Clint Dempsey. Questions around all of those American players. Josie Altidore, Clint Dempsey. Sacha Kljestan is a guy who may or may not have played himself off the roster for the World Cup. Certainly didn't make a good case, and if he wasn't already in the mix, that probably did some damage to his possibilities. Look around that team yesterday. Who played well for the U.S. against Ukraine? Anybody? Tim Howard. Okay, let's goalkeepers or whatever. We'll leave that to the side. Tim Howard played well. Alejandro Bedoya, give him a passing grade, perhaps. Maybe Jeff Cameron gets a passing grade. Just barely. By far, not the worst player on the field. Certainly, by far, not the worst defender on the field. But he still had his issues. Again, it seemed to be an issue with across the board with that team. They had a good 10, 20-minute spell to start the second half. They actually had some moments, I thought, to start the game where they controlled it a bit. They didn't create many chances, but they at least had the ball, at least kept Ukraine from jamming it down their throats. Coming right at that center back pairing, getting those guys completely out of position. And that's part of the communication. That's part of the understanding between John Brooks and Aguchi Onyewu. These are guys, again, haven't played together. The funny thing people were talking about on Twitter is that you could hear Tim Howard going absolutely ape over those guys and what they needed to be doing. Edgar Castillo out on the left. Oh, Edgar. Not good, Edgar. Not good. Not good at all. Doesn't seem to, look, I know he plays there, the club level. This doesn't seem to be his position, certainly not at the international level. We got to see a little bit of Aaron Johansson. We had Fabian Johnson on the left. Fabian Johnson, okay. I thought he didn't see the ball nearly enough. But again, we're not going to take that result, just like Mexico shouldn't take a scoreless draw against Nigeria when Ochoa had to make, 10 saves, something like that. We're not going to take those results and extrapolate them to the World Cup and say, oh, well, these guys are in trouble. If the United States was in trouble in the World Cup, that was the case before they went to before they went to Cyprus and lost to Ukraine. And I threw in that article again. It's not the Ukraine. It's Ukraine. My fault. My apologies. Brian on Twitter, BR_James. If he makes the U.S. national team roster, would Juan Agudelo become the first MLS homegrown player to play in a World Cup? Big milestone if true. Juan Agudelo is not technically... Was he technically a homegrown signing? I thought he arrived with the Red Bulls before that program even existed. Now, if you mean in technical terms rather than the rules, then I suppose that's possible. I mean, within an academy, I guess that might be the case. I suppose that might be the case. Signed on March 26, 2010. He was not, like I said, I don't think, I guess what you're saying is the first player to come out of an MLS academy. Yeah, that would be good. That would be good a good sign for the academies. Bigger question coming from Alexi Lawless. A little bit of the phone lines for this a little bit later as well. What if the United States won the World Cup? What would happen? What would happen? How would it fundamentally change soccer in America if the United States won the World Cup? Now, I think everybody has thought about this. Clearly, look, we're sports fans. Every sports fan imagines their team going on and winning a championship. If you're a fan of the U.S. national team, you've imagined them winning the World Cup. What happens in your head? I want to know what the picture looks like. And not just the celebration and the bars going nuts and maybe people taking to the streets and honking horns and waving flags. Because that would happen. It would be weird, by the way. Because even during a World Cup, the outward signs of patriotism and support for the national team they're not real, they're not really that common. They're not out there that much. So if the United States wins the World Cup, after all of that, maybe not taking to the streets. Can we imagine people taking, like people in, would like New York, would the people of New York take to the streets if the United States won the World Cup? I'd be curious to know if that would happen. But we want to talk about the landscape of soccer here, if and when the United States wins a World Cup. 347-756-6276 is the phone number. We're on Twitter at Soccer Morning. Hit me up there with answers to all of those questions, and we'll address them. We'll answer them. We'll use your answers on the show. JT Delaney, that U.S. game was placed to answer questions about the plane. They made their case to book a ticket to the Bahamas. Rim shot for JT. But yeah, again, look, from an information, look, if you are going to make no judgments about which kind of information, positive or negative, you're getting out of that game was a success for Jurgen Klinsmann in that he got plenty of information that he can now go back to his office and sit down and watch the tape and think about his roster and go, well, look, if it's between this guy and this guy, that guy just laid an egg against Ukraine. I'm not taking him. Bellamy Behrman on Twitter. He says, as a fan of MLS, any statement about the relative quality of lower tier Europe versus MLS yesterday, or too many variables? I'm not sure exactly what you mean, Bellamy. I'm assuming what you're saying is there weren't that many MLS guys. There were no MLS guys except for Clint Dempsey, right? Clint Dempsey was the only MLS player in the mix yesterday. And the talking point coming out of the game was the United States misses its MLS players, and I think even Jurgen Klinsmann afterwards said, yes, definitely, we missed the MLS players. And how odd that is that the dynamic has flipped, and now it's not the United States needing its European players to be competitive, it's needing the MLS players to be competitive. And I'll say this again, while I like the idea that this reflects well in MLS, and sure it does. Sure it does. It reflects well in MLS. It's also a matter of circumstance. It's a matter of these things are cyclical. A lot of them. The United States is trying to get better at developing players. And that will mean a slow increase in the number of quality professionals we produce as a nation. It should. I mean, if you're doing anything better than you were doing before, it should mean an increase, at least in the numbers. Pure numbers, professionals out there. Now, when we're talking about the quality of our senior internationals, I think that sometimes can be a matter of chance. Sometimes that can be a matter of things coming together at the right time. Look at that team in 2002 that went to Japan and South Korea and put in that performance, made it to the quarterfinals, and gave Germany all they could handle. And if not for a Torsten Frings handball, maybe gets by Germany. You look at that team and sort of look at the coming together of the players on that team. And then look at where they came from and how they got to where they were and how they became professionals and the path they took. You wouldn't look at that team and pick out more than a handful of those guys and say, they took a path we want our players taking now. College soccer is getting slammed left and right in the modern American soccer context. I think it still has a place. There are obviously issues with it. But I think if you asked most American fans, how would you prefer a kid develop his game to become a professional? They'd leave out college soccer altogether. They might not say an MLS academy, but they'd certainly say an academy of some sort. Then they say, he plays, he goes through an academy and then he plays in some reserve league games and maybe he goes in this country. Now we've got the USL Pro connection. The Red Bulls are going to start up their Red Bulls 2. We've already got the Galaxy 2. Teams are partnering all over the place. Hopefully that bridges that gap a little bit. Or you could say, I hope he goes overseas and gets to go to Liverpool or Juventus or Arsenal and becomes a professional that way. No one says, I really hope that they go to St. John's and play for 3 or 4 years and then turn professional and either sign a contract overseas or go through MLS. Nobody says that. Nobody would say that. And yet that you look at that 2002 team, and where did most of those guys come from? Not Landon Donovan. He was a phenom. He came right out of high school. He went to Bradenton, residency, DeMarcus Beasley, same thing. But the rest of those guys, where did they come from? What path did they take? Get a couple of European Americans mixed in there. And that team is the best performing World Cup team in American soccer history. Outside of ancient times. Sorry. I'm leaving out 1930 and the third place finish. My bad. But clearly in the modern context, that's the bar now. 2002 set the bar. And since then, we've been trying to get back to it. We've had a disaster of a World Cup. We've had a knockout stage appearance and a loss to Ghana in extra time, ripping our hearts out. And now we've got another chance. And this time, we're in the group of death. This time, we're in against 3 of the world's best teams. I mean, let's just flat out say it like it is. And you look at the makeup of the team, and yeah, there's some college guys in there. There's some MLSers who went through the standard path. But we're also working with a different kind of landscape. And we want, and again, the notion, nobody's saying let's double down on college soccer. Let's figure this out. This is where we got our best team. Most of our players from that best World Cup team came out of college. So clearly that's where we get our best players. Let's go do that. No, it's the opposite. We got to catch up to the rest of the world. How does the rest of the world do it? Well, they don't involve college. They don't do college soccer in 3-month seasons. They do academies. If you get an education, you get it as part of your soccer education. It's part of joining an academy. I just think it's interesting that we sometimes forget about these contextual parts of the story. Because again, we are staring down the barrel at an 0-3 World Cup. Very possible. I hope not. And the little tiny bit of optimism I have doesn't allow me to think they're going to go 0-3. I'm going to believe that they're going to be Ghana. And then who knows what happens. Maybe they fight it out against Portugal. Maybe they keep Ronaldo quiet. Stranger things have happened. And then they go into that third game and Germany's already coasting into the second round and the U.S. can sort of, just be free and play. See what happens. I don't know. Again, stranger things have happened. I'm not going to close the book on the World Cup because they drew Ghana, Portugal, and Germany. I don't even know how I started on this discussion, but here we are. All right, let's ask this question from Martha DeCamp. Which situation is worse, Josie not doing well on a bad team, or Chicharito not getting minutes for a good team? Now, again, he's got good in quotation marks. Clearly, this is an underwhelming season for Manchester United, but they are obviously a much bigger and better team than Sunderland. So the question is, these are the most visible, high-profile strikers that each of these countries have, these ancient rivals. Which is a better situation? Which is a worse situation? I keep saying better. That's clearly the wrong way to look at this. Which is worse? And again, Chicharito came out after 45 minutes, largely ineffective from what I saw or from what I read, and may have picked up an injury. Josie Altidore went 80, didn't do a whole lot, didn't get the ball in great spots, but probably needs to work harder. 951, you're on the air.
I think Onyewu and Brooks just signed their waiver from the World Cup yesterday.
Honestly though, were they really under consideration? Look, we got Omar Gonzalez, Matt Besler, and why am I blanking? I just completely blanked on the guy in San Jose. Why am I blanking? What's his name? Oh my gosh, the other side. I'm sorry, the name just flew out of my head. I'll get it back here in a second, but.
Playing really good. Who would you put up top? Like, if we play with two forwards, Altidore and who else?
Well, I don't think that Jurgen Klinsmann is likely to play with two forwards until it's late in the game.
But hasn't Altidore shown that he needs the second man up there to be mobile and do what he does?
Yes and no. I mean, he went through a stretch last year where he was absolutely on fire, and I don't think that had anything to do with having. At the time, I thought the same solution. But I don't think that's necessarily the issue here. Clarence Goodson.
Who would you put?
Clarence Goodson is the guy I couldn't remember for some reason. And no offense, sorry. Clarence Goodson is in this mix. He's on the plane as well. Who's the back four?
Yeah.
In my back four is Jeff Cameron, Omar Gonzalez, Matt Besler, and Fabian Johnson.
Have you ever seen? I think it's a lady push the Red Bulls. Do you think he could have a future in the team?
No. I mean, not right now. He's too inconsistent. He got dropped by the Red Bulls. He got dropped out of their lineup last year. I mean, he's had some issues. He's also 5'2", so not that should be an issue, but I'm just saying it's out there. It's a thing. He hasn't shown. There hasn't been any indication that Connor Lade is close to the national. I love watching the guy play, but I don't think he's good enough for the national team now.
Do you think it's weird that Klinsmann looks at a lot of German and European players, but he's left out Fagundes?
Fagundes isn't eligible, man.
He's not?
No, he's not a citizen yet. I appreciate the phone call. Going to move on. 803, you're on the air.
Hey, it's Bob. How are you?
Bob, what's up? Are you in a wind tunnel right now?
Excuse me?
Nothing. Go ahead, Bob.
I think the best situation is Josie because he's playing, but my question is, what's his role going to be with Sunderland from now on? I don't know if you read Poet's comments about him before the Arsenal game, but it sounds like he's ready to bench him then.
Oh, I think that Poyet is using every tool available to motivate Josie Altidore. I saw somebody on Twitter say, I don't think Josie plays again for Sunderland this season. I think that's the most ridiculous thing possible because they don't have enough depth to completely eliminate Josie Altidore as a possibility. So he's going to get some more time. I don't know. Again, this is a difficult situation. It's a relegation-threatened team that has not played well at all this season. They had very short spurts where they looked like a competent Premier League team. If Josie Altidore is just one of many issues that Poyet has to deal with, and he's trying to motivate him. Josie hasn't been good, but he can't take Josie not being good out of the context of that team being terrible. And I think I'm with you. I think it's worse that Chicharito's not playing than Josie Altidore's situation. We're even if he's not, he's at least getting opportunities to turn it around at any moment. Whereas Hernandez doesn't even get that chance.
Right, at least he's playing every week.
Yeah. Well,
let's go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I mean, now he's getting benched a little bit, but we'll see how that goes. I mean, he's at least getting a chance more regularly than Hernandez. Yes, go ahead.
Right. I was thinking about what you said yesterday about the whole tryout games, but don't you think by now he should have brought the whole team yesterday? If you look at Brazil, Mexico, Nigeria, all those teams traveled and brought their overseas players and whatnot. I mean, we should have brought the MLS guys. It should have been a regular game.
Well, I mean, he's obviously in a tough spot. With the MLS season starting in a couple of days, it's a really weird time to take those guys away from their team. I suppose he could have put his foot down on that, but I imagine that he sort of talked himself into this game as an opportunity to see guys. Because if you call up your full team, there's no Onyewu, there's no Brooks,
Right.
There's no Morales in training. There's no, not that Morales is a candidate for the plane. I'm just saying,
Right.
Klinsmann obviously is a fan of getting as much information as he can on these guys. There may have been no room for Julian Green to come train. I don't know. You could have still included him even if he's not eligible. You probably wouldn't get Agudelo in a full team. I mean, those are some questions to ask yourself as you're trying to put together this roster. I think that this was a justifiable way to use the date, but I can see your argument.
Right. Well, do you think the fact that he didn't bring Beasley, but he brought Castillo, so that it's Beasley's job to lose at this point?
It's a good question. I don't know. I guess that our general sense is that Evans is more solid in his spot than Beasley. Is that how we feel, or is it the other way around?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I went to the Carolina Cup this past week, and the first game, Evans started at right back for Seattle. Yedlin was on the bench, so I don't even know if that means anything, but
yeah,
it's just something to think about.
Yeah, look, I mean, both of those guys are playing out of position, but I think you could make the argument that Beasley is more a slightly better fit at left back than Evans is at right back. And yet, Klinsmann has valued what Evans brings to that position, even when his defensive abilities are up for question. It's an odd thing. I don't know what that means about Beasley, and I think Beasley even scored on the weekend. I mean, it's an interesting situation. I appreciate the call, Bob.
All right, thanks.
All right, bye. 347-756-6276 is the phone number. If you have any opinion on this, which is worse, Chicharito not getting minutes at a good team, or Josie Altidore playing poorly on a bad team? It's a terrible choice to have. I mean, this is just... why no one should willingly want to choose between these two things. This is really a life or death kind of question. The only reason you have to answer it is if your life is on the line. If you're forced to make a choice. Make a choice between these two terrible, terrible things, or I'm going to push you off this cliff. It's pretty much where we are right now with this. All right, before we get to Dave Clark at 11 o'clock, let's go ahead and open up the floor to this question from Alexi Lawless. Shot this over to me this morning. He's flying right now. So let's answer this question so Alexi can hear the answer when he gets on the ground wherever he's going. If the U.S. men's national team actually won a World Cup, how much or how little would the U.S. soccer landscape change, and in what ways? This is very much like if you're taking some kind of soccer class in college, which would be awesome. This is like your essay question at the end of the year in the final, right? Write an essay. Write 1,000 words on what the American soccer landscape would look like if the United States won a World Cup. As for like ticker tape parades and taking to the streets, Rico in Atlanta, maybe take to the streets, but nothing disastrous would happen like when the Lakers or Bulls win a championship. I don't know. I think that if you give any large group in numerous American cities the opportunity to gather and celebrate, it's likely to result in a car being turned over. I mean, let's just be honest about this, right? People like turning over cars. I don't know what that is. And the couch fire thing, I know that's like mostly Morgantown, West Virginia, where I've actually spent some time in Morgantown. It's an interesting place. Don't light couches on fire. Don't flip cars. But yeah, it would be weird to see what the reaction was. I mean, I'd be interested in that. But in terms of the landscape of American soccer, let's imagine here. What exactly would happen to the way the main... I mean, look, there are a couple of different avenues here, I guess. How it would affect soccer as it exists right now, the soccer community. The people are out there getting kids ready to be professionals, or just kids playing in general. And the academy system, and the MLS and NASL and USL Pro and NPSL and all of these divisions all the way down the line, PDL. everything that exists right now, and everybody who's involved intimately with soccer right now, that's one area to consider. And then there's the people who aren't that interested right now, the mainstream media, the people who don't give soccer its fair due, the ESPNs of the world. How would that, I think most of us think about the mainstream reaction. Because we've talked about this too fairly recently. We've sort of analyzed the reasons why American soccer fans are both have an inferiority complex and are aspirational. We are an aspirational bunch. We have this innate need for the sport we love in this country and the league we love if you're an MLS fan or an NASL fan to become bigger than it is. To become much more important than it is in this country. To get validation. That's the key word here. So many of us are waiting for validation when it comes to soccer. We want to be able to walk into our office, into our school, down the street, and not be the only soccer fan for a mile. Or if we bring up soccer, to have somebody say, oh yeah, I saw that game last night. I watched that game last night too. When somebody says at the water cooler or wherever, see the game last night? We want them to be talking about soccer. So when we think about this, what will happen if the United States wins a World Cup? We don't go, well, you know what? That's just going to mean that, we're going to feel really good about our development program and we're going to double down on that. And hopefully more money goes into U.S. soccer and it's going to be fantastic. We think about all of those other people who don't care right now caring suddenly. 401, you're on the air.
Hey, Jason, how's it going? It's Julian in Providence, Rhode Island.
What's up, man?
So I just wanted to start out there that I came up with I conjured up a couple of positive thoughts about yesterday. First off, no injuries, and which is always a good thing. And then number two, the Ghana game. I don't know if you saw that, but they lost to Montenegro yesterday. So,
yeah.
Hey, there's something to cheer about.
Sure. If you want to take a little solace out of the U.S. loss to Ukraine, then yes, look to Ghana losing to Montenegro. Yes.
Yeah, that's the best I got. But
yeah, sure. Anyway, again, Julian, in the grander context, it's once again us sort of trying to figure out how importantly to take these friendly results, no matter where they are, or what roster is playing, or who we're playing against. Now, there are teams you play a friendly, you're supposed to beat them. I don't know. Was the United States supposed to beat Ukraine in Cyprus with that roster? I don't know. Again, you want to see a better performance overall. And that certainly reflects on Klinsmann. Did he prepare these guys right in the short time span he had to get them ready for Ukraine? I don't know. A couple of responses coming in. How would the landscape change? Now, again, I think it should be more, and we should go a little bit deeper here. And Alexi's question says the U.S. soccer landscape. We have to define what that is first, don't we? What is the U.S. soccer landscape? Does that include a future wherein MLS is one of the major leagues? Does it include a future where soccer is in the same conversation that the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball are in? If it does, that's where we go to. That's where our minds go to. It doesn't go to, well, this team or this development program. Maybe I'm doing a bad job of explaining what I'm talking about. But we don't think about ourselves necessarily. I mean, the thrill of being a fan and our team winning a World Cup, that would be immense. That would be amazing. But when you and maybe you have your group, and certainly the American Outlaws, you guys, everybody would be together celebrating this. But I think a lot of us also have that fantasy of, I'm going to be able to talk about soccer with that guy at work who only talks about the NFL or only talks about the NBA. Be interesting. JT, it would change big time for young kids, but not in the South. I actually don't think that's true. I think it would have a fairly large impact in the South, just like it would everywhere. Now, would the impact be the same in the South, considering how big football is as it is in other places? I don't know. I think it would be big, though. And if MLS gets into the South, it'll be a little bit bigger, wouldn't it? Eric says, I want to get to the point where I don't jump for joy surprise when I find a soccer fan at work. I mean, again, that's it. That's your fantasy, right, Eric? Your fantasy is not to be alone. I don't want to be alone anymore. And let's be fair about this. I think this is the dynamic at work. Maybe I'm, if I got this wrong, tell me. But having worked in plenty of offices, this is the dynamic I feel is at work in those places. There are more than one soccer fan. There's more than one guy or woman in the office who cares about this sport and may follow it passionately. In fact, there may be more than 2. There may be 5, 6, 7, 10, depending on the size of your office. But nobody talks about it. It doesn't come up in the same casual conversations as did you see the local NFL game last night? You may even hide it a bit, not intentionally. It's not like you're ashamed of being a soccer fan. You just don't want to have to go through that awkward discussion of, well, what did you do last night? Oh, I watched the soccer game. You did the what? You what? You watched soccer? That's still a thing here. That still happens. And I think a lot of us hold back. This is why we find our groups. This is why you go join the supporters group for your MLS team. This is why you go join American Outlaws, to go watch the game at the bar with everybody else who is of like mind. Because it's just not out there and available, and it's just not part of the culture yet. I mean, that's an indication, right? I mean, this is not something we should be ashamed of. Soccer is making great strides in this country. MLS is doing very well at the turnstiles. Yeah, we're not watching on TV yet. That's again an indication of the culture. Eventually, we will get to a point, I imagine. I mean, look, I see nothing that's going to suddenly stop soccer's momentum, and it is moving forward. So there is, at least on a long enough timeline, some future where none of this is an issue, where Eric isn't jumping up and down for joy when he finds a soccer fan at work. It's just there. It's one of those things. It comes with your person. It comes with your person. Not everybody's a sports fan, and you have had those conversations too, where it's, what are you going to do this weekend? Oh, I'm having a bunch of people over to watch the NFL game. Oh, I'm not a sports fan. I don't watch them. Okay, you move on. It's just a thing. Hey, not a sports fan, move on. But we don't even do that with soccer. What are you going to do this weekend? How to bunch of people over? Going to watch the Manchester Derby. The what? You're having a bunch of people over. I'm going to watch the World Cup game. Oh, I heard about the World Cup. Who's in it? Are the Americans in it? Do we have a team? Do we have a soccer team? That's still a thing, too. Hillary on Twitter, if the U.S. national team would get to the World Cup final game, my husband would finally watch with me. And that's the thing. We've got those dynamics, too. Within your personal relationships. So it's not just a fantasy of Eric finding another soccer fan at work. It's the fantasy of Hillary being able to watch a soccer game with her significant other, because that is still a thing. Because you enter a relationship. I'm a soccer fan. I'm not. Okay, well, that's just the way it works in this country. We'll make it, we'll be okay. I'll watch soccer. You don't have to watch with me. Juan on Twitter. Juan, this is actually a decent question. Do we have to win a semifinal appearance, and even a loss in the third place game could be a big springboard? I think that's a different kind of question. Juan, it's a good one. Where's the line for success? Where do we start to say now what they've done will transcend not just soccer, but sort of transcend sports a bit? Because really, when you want to talk about the big culturally important sporting events, they're the ones that transcend the smaller, it's still massive, but the smaller group of full-time sports fans. The reason the Super Bowl is so big isn't because football fans watch it. It's because football fans and everybody else watches it. If not for the game, for the commercials. If not for the commercials, for the halftime show. If not for any of that, just for the camaraderie of the Super Bowl party. Yanks United on Twitter. Went to the doctors yesterday to get my shots for Brazil. Nurse says, oh, I know about that. My son talks about it. Okay. again, but the tenor of that discussion is, here's something unique that doesn't happen every day in America. I'm giving this to you. My son talks about. Not, how do you feel about our chances? Because isn't that the way it goes anywhere else? How do you feel about our chances? What do you think about the team? It's not even, you don't even need to introduce yourself into that discussion. If you're going to talk about the NFL team in town as the season's getting underway, there's not really this need to say, oh, I know about that. It's just assumed everybody's talking about the NFL. Now, I know that's that's a high bar. The NFL is a very high bar. We're not going to get there anytime soon. Eric says, the relationship dream already came true for me. My wife now coherently talks tactics during games. That's impressive, man. Good job. Absolutely. Good job. Rico wants to put this at the feet of the organizations involved. Sadly, MLS and U.S. Soccer don't promote themselves enough. I'm not sure that that's true, Rico. And I think there's only so much that they can do. Now, there are individual cases where local MLS teams have had trouble promoting themselves, either because they didn't provide the budget to do it, because the ownership said, well, we're not going to really put a lot of money into this, or because they were ineffective doing it. So that is fair. But, again, I think it's interesting to wonder where the line is, how important, what this would change, and what you think about, what you allow yourself to think about first. The United States has won a World Cup. Area code 818, you're on the air.
Hey, it's Goodman Brown in Hollywood. You touched on a few things there. One, I remember in Chicago, the 2002 World Cup, and local news was just couldn't get enough of the fact that lines were around the corner to get in to watch the World Cup at 3 a.m.
Oh, that's the best phenomenon ever, right? When the mainstream media is surprised about soccer.
Right. And that was then. And in 2006, I specifically remember I was telling friends, I was always known as, the soccer guy, like, oh, he's a soccer guy.
Yeah, there's always
ask him. You probably were too. And you'd sit on the bus and there'd be like two old ladies talking, and they'd be saying, one would say to the other, they're called Ghanaian, not Ghanaian. It was just for a month every 4 years in the United States, it's a conversational thing, and it really does make you glow inside. Mm-hmm. But you multiply that out times like what it's like on a Super Sunday, where everyone's interested in this game for a number of different reasons. And, you multiply that again, and you're starting to touch on what it would be like for fans. But, the thing that you were talking about that really struck me was, people at work, and this has happened to me before. I work with a lot of people that like soccer. And when I come in on a Monday, I can talk to them. I can talk to the Juventus fan, and he'll talk about Juventus. Uh-huh. And on international breaks, he'll want to talk about Italy.
Sure.
I mean, he lives in L.A. He lives here. I could talk to the other guy that only like the Dutch national team. This is the only thing. I could talk to a couple other guys that are, total Euro haughty, Real Madrid or Barcelona arguments they constantly have. But I can't come in and be like, oh, did you see that Fire game? Can you believe the Fire guy? We're lucky enough to get that guy from Santos.
You actually sorry, Goodman. You actually highlighted something interesting that I hadn't gotten to it. I mean, just talking through that, you're right. The breadth of soccer. I mean, the amount of soccer that is available to consume or be interested in actually makes it less likely we'll ever get to that certain point where it's ubiquitous in terms of the common discussion. We may share a love of soccer, but we may not love the same kind of soccer or the same country version of soccer, which will make it more difficult. It's a good point.
And the thing is, because I love it, I can talk about how Juventus did over the weekend. I can't. I spend far too much time trying to figure out what happened over the weekend, watching this, watching that. I've got an online subscription here. I am that guy. Mm-hmm. So I can have these conversations. But what I want is I want these guys to be, and this is what I hope would be the legacy of a World Cup win, or even, and like that guy said, a semifinal appearance would do just fine. Is I want these guys to be Galaxy season ticket holders. You know, I because I live out here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I want I want to be having these conversations riding down to the game. You know, talking about Juventus, talking about whatever, but also talking about what the Galaxy did and what the Galaxy are going to do tonight. You know, who they're up against, knowing the other team.
Yeah,
and you know,
Goodman, you've got
my hope.
You've got two different portions of the sort of the same fantasy here. One of them is soccer just making it in the mainstream a little bit more, becoming more ubiquitous, having a chance to talk soccer. I mean, you've already got that situation in a lot of ways that most people don't have, and I'm getting some responses on Twitter in that regard. Just don't have anybody. My fantasy is to be able to talk to one person about MLS or the national team, says James, and then you've got another one. And this is sort of what I was talking about when we talk about when I identify our fantasies going immediately to the mainstream and sort of what ESPN would do with soccer now and how many Americans would get into the game. There's also within soccer already the notion that a U.S. national team World Cup win or semifinal appearance or whatever could turn into all of those fans who don't give this country its fair shake when it comes to soccer being interested suddenly. So your Juventus fan becomes a Galaxy fan. That's the other part of it.
And again, we're not trying to convert anyone from being Juventus to anything. I'm trying to get them to, in addition.
Right.
I mean, in this country,
right,
we all, for so long, you know, we've had to look elsewhere for soccer. And you know, I don't think Major League Soccer is that bad of a league, and I find it infinitely watchable, especially when you're going to have off seasons like, you know, like the one we just had. You know, it's you could seriously look at the opening week, and you know, it just starts to salivate. It's a wonderful league. It is one of the most entertaining around, and I'm not going to get into, you know, where it stands and how you want to rank that or anything. I just want other people to at least embrace it. And it's tough. I mean, everything is tougher. This is a country where we have two national teams. You know what I mean? Everything is different here. Yeah. And you know, our marketing is different. Our TV is different. I mean, ESPN and Fox, they show things because they feel they have to. You know what I mean? Because generations have been raised watching certain sports. Soccer had to do a completely different thing. Major League Soccer had to do a completely different thing to connect to these people.
Yeah.
And I do not soapbox anymore. I do not go out and be like, oh, well, here's why soccer's great. Here's why soccer's great. You know, like, I don't care. I mean, if I have to actually preach to you about it, you know, I don't need you there.
Yeah.
It sells itself.
I made the same transition. I sort of had the same evolution, Goodman. I started out, I mean, I started my blog a little bit more than 5 years ago. And I was very much of that attitude that, you know, if you don't like soccer, I'm gonna argue about why soccer is great. If you don't understand it, I'm gonna explain to you why it's great. All of those things. And I think that's the wrong attitude to have. And I'm at the point now where my mantra more than anything else is trust the game. You trust the game to slowly work itself into people's bloodstream, because that's what it does. And I suppose, and every time we get to a World Cup, we talk about the World Cup bump when it comes to MLS. Is there going to be a bump in the MLS, the attendance or the TV numbers or whatever? And most of the time so far, we've had 98, 2000, 2006, 2010. That's 4 World Cups so far in MLS history. There's never been that sort of identifiable, tangible, real bump in terms of interest. I mean, when you get 50,000 people out for your 4th of July celebration, it's because of the fireworks, not because of the soccer. So we want to see that, you know, we want to see that impact, but I think it's more of a slow burn. And this is why I don't have patience with people who argue for radical change right now in the way that America does soccer. I'm not going to say that everything that we're doing now and the way that we do it is the exact right way to do it. I don't believe that. But what I do believe is that more than anything else, the important factor in getting better players, more people interested, a more popular sport, a more entertaining sport, a sport people watch on television, is time. It's time. And the fact that as long as MLS can stick around, and as long as we are putting out a national team that is not only competitive but potentially making progress and could one day surprise some people, then we will be okay. It's when things start to crumble and we lose a league like in 1984, or we don't play any national games of a significance for 50 years, that the game that it doesn't matter that we don't get the progress. Stick it out. You know what I'm saying? That's my issue. That's my attitude.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, like, you may love wine, but let it ferment. You know what I mean? If you keep going back to check on it and it's still grape juice, it's because you're not giving it enough time.
That's right. You know, exactly right.
The thing that what you say about time, what I think we're actually right now the luckiest generation of soccer fans, maybe, you know, in history,
sure,
is that the United States is going to win the World Cup for the first time, and we're going to see that.
If it happens, right? Yes, absolutely.
That's a win. You know, that's a win.
Yeah.
We may be old,
sure,
you know, but we're going to see it happen for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
It bothers me that, you know, again, back to work, a couple of people I work with, you know, the Italian guy and the guy who's randomly a Spanish fan just because he picked Spain, because he likes Spain, because his whole life Spain have been great, right? You don't know.
Yeah.
So he just randomly picked the national side. That drives me crazy. But again, we don't fight it. But anyway, the Italian guy, he expects to win.
Sure.
Like, he expects to win this World Cup. He expected to win the last one, and he did win the one before that.
Yeah.
You know, like, that kind of, that'll happen for maybe our grandkids or our kids, whatever. That will never happen for us. We will never take that lightly.
Yeah.
We'll never be like, okay, now we got to go and win the next one. That World Cup hangover for the United States will last for maybe 6 or 8 years.
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely. And that's the other part of this. And when we ask the question, how would the U.S. soccer landscape change if the United States wins a World Cup? We're not talking about, people would really be talking about soccer for a year. Yes, that's true. But we'd also have this much longer shadow, and that win would set off so many domino effects throughout. You know, more interest in soccer means more money coming into soccer. That money can be funneled in this direction and that direction. Better player development. Our academies grow up a little bit more. Again, more fans moving from being Euro snobs, if you want to use that phrase, to MLS fans, increases the attention, which increases the number of tickets sold and the people watching on. Again, it's a cascading effect. I don't want to draw it out and make it, you know, some kind of magic bullet that's going to solve all of American soccer's problems, but it would have a massive impact. Thanks for the call, Goodman. I'm going to move on.
All right, we'll see you. Thanks.
401, you're on the air.
Hi, Jason. It's Bellamy.
What's up, Bellamy?
Hey, I just wanted to pitch in. You guys have been talking a lot about kind of the perspective from the American side, and I was just interested to hear what you think the kind of more European perspective would be.
It's good.
If America won the World Cup.
It's a good question. I don't know. I don't want to presume. I don't want to presume to know exactly how Europe would feel. I imagine there are certain portions of individual fan bases that might not be too happy about it. In the general, we don't want Americans winning anything, or anti-American spirit. I mean, there's certainly an anti-American vibe bouncing around the globe most times.
Right.
I think Mexico would have a conniption. Beyond that, I don't know. I mean, it would be interesting. I think that what you get from the English is sort of this like stunned respect and like, well, bravo, you managed to do it. We never thought you'd get here, that kind of thing. And the rest of the world would kind of go, well, this is weird, and then we'd just go back to business as usual, I think.
Well, I have a kind of a weird line of thinking in this way, but tell me if I'm overthinking it, because I do that. Is there almost a thought that maybe we wouldn't have earned it? That the progression that we should be going under Klinsmann actually it would benefit us to land somewhere like the semis? Because if you look at like maybe Greece in 2004, nobody respects Greece now as a national team because of it. It's
That's true.
A fluking a tournament. So I'm just It's kind of a weird, like, thought experiment.
Yeah,
you know?
the Euros have that tendency. Denmark did the same kind of thing. I'm not in the way the Greeks did it, but Denmark kind of popped up and won the tournament, and it's sort of seen as an aberration. The Euros, for whatever reason, have produced those results. The World Cup is not that tournament. The World Cup, the big boys win the World Cup, and even Spain winning it for the first time is like, well, that's they should have already had one. Why didn't they have one? Okay, there they go. Now we can crown them. And you've got Brazil and Italy and Germany, and these. I mean, to break for anybody else to sort of break into that group would be pretty stunning. So I don't know that there would be a sense of you have to pay your dues to get there, simply because the countries that have control of that title right now, the 5 or 6 or how many is it now? I don't even know. Uruguay's in that group, but they haven't won it since 19 billion years ago. That's
right.
Yeah. So in the modern context, we're talking about 5 countries. So I don't know that. I don't really know that would be a thing. It might be interesting to see if somebody said, well, they really should have sort of grown up over the years and reached this point rather than if it feels like a fluke, it's going to feel like a fluke, regardless if it's the United States or say. I don't know. Give me another example. I mean, Australia. They're even farther down the ladder than we are. I'm trying to. If South Korea managed to win a World Cup, even though South Korea has done some things on the international stage, or even Japan. Let's use Japan.
Okay. Yeah,
I think Japan. If Japan won, some people would say it was a fluke, and some people would say, "Well, that's amazing. Look at what they've done in a short time span." That kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, I appreciate the phone call, man.
Well,
go ahead.
The equivalent, would be. Do you think then the J League gets looked at in a very different light? Because I'm always coming at this from an MLS perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I think things would change a lot in terms of the domestic league, whether it was Japan or the United States. I don't know exactly how quickly or in what manner. I mean, I would imagine that the money that would suddenly come into the sport and the league would be pretty significant, but I don't know how it would. Impact. I don't know if it would be, well, the United States won the World Cup. Let's take off the shackles and get rid of single entity and salary caps. I mean, I don't think that's happening, but it may be the first pebble in an avalanche that leads to that, I suppose.
Sure, only a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the call, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, 212. You're on the air.
Hey, what's up, Jason?
You got about 30 seconds, man.
I just want to say I'm married to a European. My daughter's a European citizen. I live in New York City with Europeans. If the U.S. win the World Cup, it will be a fluke. It'll never change a thing. They'll never respect us.
Okay. But what should we really care about them, though, if we win the World Cup? Come on.
I would be thrilled. I'd be on the streets painting my face like an American flag. But
it'd be pretty awesome.
But I just think they will never give us the respect that we would rightfully deserve.
I think that it's hard for us to project to that moment. I mean, you're around Europeans all the time. You know better than I do.
Well, I don't want to claim I'm have superior knowledge or anything. I'm just saying from my personal experience.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, there's that attitude you can never shake. I mean, even that's true in a lot of sports. There's always a team that maybe wins something, and we all kind of look down our noses at them, even if they have done it and won it fairly. And
it's within Europe as well, right? Greece won the 2004 Euros.
Right.
Still, they get no respect.
Yeah.
Still, it's a fluke. Still, it'll just never.
That's partly because of the manner in which they won. Thanks for the call. I got to go. Thanks. Greece does. First of all, Greece hasn't gotten back to that level since then. So there's that. And then again, it's the way they did it offends so many soccer people. I mean, it's a way to go and win something, but you're not gonna win fans outside of Greece for it. All right, when we come back, Dave Clark from Sounder at Heart will preview the Seattle Sounders season in 2014. Don't go anywhere. Be right back.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Joined on the phone now by Dave Clark. You can find his coverage of the Seattle Sounders at Sounder at Heart on the SB Nation blogging network. Mr. Clark, how are you?
It's a great day.
Is it a great day? Is Saturday going to be a better day?
Yeah, it's looking towards probably upper 40s with rain,
which is perfect Seattle weather. All right. So look, the season is here. The season is nigh, as I will say. This is a team that made a splash with Clint Dempsey last year, brought in Obafemi Martins, has been one of the bigger spenders in MLS. The season did not go as planned down the stretch in 2013, and although they made the playoffs, eventually it obviously ended against bitter rivals. How do you sort of put in context last year? Is it a total waste, utter disappointment, or is it something a little less bad than that?
It's both an utter disappointment and kind of a symbol of how high expectations are in Seattle for soccer and in the league for what the Sounders do. Most teams would be really excited to finish sixth in the single table standings, to make the playoffs, to win a game in the playoffs. All of those things for other teams would be like, yes! Over here, it's like, damn, that season sucked. And, it's like, well, yeah, it sucked. 80% of the way through, they were in first for the Supporters' Shield. It took an epic collapse in order to fall as far as they did, and they still made the playoffs. It was a failure, but there were a lot of really good things that happened.
Well, sure, but Dave, if they were a sixth place in the single table, fourth place in the West overall team for most of the year, or settled into that midseason and then sort of just finished out the year that way, it would feel better than it did with the collapse.
Oh, absolutely, but at this point, I think you got to look at the season as a whole. What did they do to, through the off season? What did they do to try to shore up those things that caused losing streaks that they both started the season with and ended the season with? How they tried to kind of mellow those out a little bit. And what? It was Portland, and that kind of hurts probably as much as anything. I think if it had been Salt Lake or the Galaxy again, people wouldn't have necessarily cared, but Portland advanced 5-3 on aggregate, and they get to hold that over Seattle's heads.
Let's turn to 2014 then, and you talked about high expectations, and that's part of what casts a pall over last season, despite a playoff win or a playoff appearance, and then a play-in round win. What are the expectations for 2014? Where do the Sounders fit in the Western Conference?
They're just as high. It's not like I don't see anybody nationally and that expects anything less than the playoffs. I don't see anybody locally who said that just a playoff appearance is enough. Even Siggy Schmidt's like, we have to put ourselves in contention for a trophy. That's where they need to be. And contention isn't making the playoffs. Contention's making a run in the playoffs. Contention is making the Open Cup final. Contention is going into October with a shot at the Supporters' Shield. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of expectations that really every year since 2009, that's been the expectations here. And it's a tough game to play if every year the expectation is to win a title.
Someone on Twitter this morning, when we announced that you'd be making an appearance, asked if Siggy Schmidt's on the hot seat. Now, that seems like a ridiculous question on the face of it, but we were sort of asking around Siggy's job security last season during the collapse. Is there any sense at all? And I know that most of the message that comes out of the Sounders front office is, I don't want to say that it's very 1984, but they're very united, and it's always pretty positive. They back Siggy to a fault. Is there any sense at all that if this doesn't go well for a couple of months, he could be out?
It would have to go horribly for him to be out in the middle of the season.
Okay.
This is his contract year, though. So that gives him a really easy, after action review, essentially, when his contract's up.
Right.
It's, look, our standard is trophies, and you only did it half the time, and you got worse over time. If that's the conversation that they have to have, then yes, he's in danger of getting that extension or the renewal. If you survived that kind of collapse last season, what would it take to get let go in the middle of the year? I don't know. They went winless for 7 or 8 games.
Okay.
So yeah, go winless for 7 or 8 games to start the season. Yeah, then it's a hot seat again. But it doesn't start hot. I mean, they declared their loyalty to Sidney Schmidt quite clearly when they actually just fired the team, essentially.
Right. Yeah, let's talk about some of that roster turnover that's happened and some of the new faces. I mean, look, people are immediately going to jump to Clint Dempsey as the name to watch in the Seattle Sounders team, but added Kenny Cooper, traded for Jaleel Anibaba, whatever his role might be. Chad Marshall comes over from Columbus. There are Marco Papa added as he comes back to MLS. How different will this team feel than the team in 2013, and what do these guys bring to the table?
They said during the offseason their whole goal was to get younger and faster. And while Chad Marshall and Kenny Cooper, two of the high-end players they brought in, everybody else fits the younger and faster mold.
Okay.
And honestly, we've known about Kenny Cooper and Chad Marshall for some time, but it's not like they're 30 yet. They're just guys that with long careers at this point.
They feel like they're 30. They feel like they're both 35. To be honest with you,
because we've talked about them forever. Like they're both in their late 20s. For a defender, that's perfect. Jaleel Anibaba looks to probably start the majority of the games as Chad Marshall's partner as a center back. He is clearly an athletic specimen. They've gotten faster on the wings. Marco Papa is faster than Mauro Rosales. And they've kind of abandoned the whole idea of every other attack should be a cross that hopefully hits Eddie Johnson's head. That it got kind of static at the end of the year, and then Eddie Johnson got hurt, and Mauro Rosales was hurt, and Obafemi was hurt, and Clint was damaged, and they had one route, and that was taken away, and then nobody was healthy. So they've kind of changed things up. With Papa is different. Clint Dempsey will have will have most of the year. Obafemi Martins will be creating, but it's not like their goal is get Oba the ball every time.
Right.
It's a much more diverse offense.
Now, you mentioned Eddie Johnson. Clearly, his exits from Seattle was one of the more interesting storylines in the offseason. In an offseason that was just covered in amazing, strange, mind-blowing storylines, Eddie Johnson's exit from Seattle was certainly up there. And there were quotes from Brad Evans, who is also his national team teammate, that seemed to intimate that this year's team is a bunch of better people because we got rid of some bad people. And everybody jumped to the conclusion that it was about Eddie Johnson. How big of an impact do you think Eddie Johnson's attitude really had on the Sounders last year?
Well, I mean, he didn't just get called out by Brad. Brad went on the record with it. But Jeff Carlisle had a couple other players. There was the classic "he's the worst," and one other set of anonymous quotes that talked about lackadaisical practice attitudes and things like that. So it was clear that the locker room issues that happened here were primarily on Eddie Johnson's shoulders. But Brad also called out Mauro Rosales at one point, not by name. He just said the captain at the time didn't take control. Well, that had been Mauro for 2.5 years at that point. So there was a transition point where no longer was Brad Evans willing to kind of be a captain by action. He basically captured the armband and took control of the locker room. And I don't think that went over well. I think with Eddie calling out Mauro in the way that Brad did was kind of unique. You don't see that very often. And it's his team now. He's the leadership. He's he's the man that stands at the top, and his lieutenants are Clint Dempsey and Rivaldo Alonso. The club made it clear that that's going to be their leadership core, and the rest of the team answers to them.
Clint Dempsey is going to be a hot topic as the season starts. Did not play well down the stretch in England before moving to MLS. Did not play well when he got here. At least it was a struggle to get into the flow of things. Obviously, all of that impacted by how Seattle was playing at the time as a team. And now he's coming into the new year having not impressed at Fulham and not impressed with the national team. Is there a real concern over Clint Dempsey and his ability to be effective at that position and at that salary in this league right now?
There should be. Yeah. It's been, I think 8 or 9 months since we saw the Clint Dempsey that was Deuce, that, was magical and Captain America and all that kind of stuff. It was late spring last year. And we saw it both in league and in World Cup qualifying. That's a long time. And at his age, going that long without being great might be an indicator of something. It could mean that, as players age, they fall off the cliff. It's kind of scary because I'm an American fan and a Sounders fan, and I get to, the hopes of both of those teams kind of ride on it. So what do we need to see from Clint Dempsey early? We need to see that kind of freedom and passion that he played with last year. Though he didn't get goals and assists, he actually had some kind of secondary statistics that were rather impressive. Mm-hmm. He was still one of the best players on the team. He was creative. He did things that people didn't expect. And now hopefully some of those guys expect it now. When he, busts through triple coverage and finds a pass that winds up at a guy's feet, they're not surprised that he got through it, and so they don't bother to shoot. Instead, they're actually acting like soccer players rather than watching Clint do his stuff. That's going to be, one of the major steps because he's going to be the primary offensive conduit. Now, he's going to be in a very creative position.
Now, Dave, what you've just described is a situation where Clint Dempsey and his teammates needed to come to a better understanding of what he's capable of. They need in that moment, because you can't replicate this just by thinking about it. You have to be on the field and see what he does so you can respond appropriately. But that kind of chemistry can only come from playing together. And he went on loan to Fulham for the preseason. Why wouldn't he have stuck around?
Well, there was pressure from Jurgen. Remember, Jurgen wasn't necessarily happy about the move to MLS. So Clint had a loan written in for this offseason, specifically as part of his World Cup prep. So there was that pressure in his role as the national team captain at the time. Now, particularly when he got sat for the 3 straight games, Seattle fans, particularly myself, desperately thought he should come back. I mean, if he's not even going to be in the 18,
right? At
that point, he played, he was fit, he should have returned. That loan should have been terminated 3 weeks ago.
And now you have to wonder if it's going to take him 2 months to get into a rhythm again with his teammates.
Yeah, I don't want to go 2 months, but I think it'll be March. And March with Seattle's schedule, March is the difference between success in March is the difference between challenging for the Supporters' Shield and not. Supporting Kansas City this weekend, Toronto FC next. That's those are clubs that could be in that final hunt come October, and points against them are going to be vital. So, Seattle and Clint kind of blew the whole practice together and figured out how to gel thing.
You mentioned Sporting Kansas City opening at home against the defending MLS Cup champions. It's the first game of the year. They all count the same in the standings, but is this a statement type of game for Seattle if they can manage to beat Sporting at home?
Absolutely. It's national television. The eyes of the league are going to be on that game. It's that important. It's going to be, there are names people recognize. If you even remotely follow American soccer in the United States, you're paying attention to that one. It's a marquee matchup. So yeah, Seattle needs to make that statement. They've early in lifespan, they challenged Sporting quite well and won. I think it's 6-1-1. That's what my memory says the record is, with like 5 of those wins against the Kansas City squads being in the last, the dying moments, last 5 minutes of regulation or in added time. So they need to make that statement. They need to make it soon and early. Like most MLS teams, they go through these waves where they have a series of home games and then they're on the road for several weeks. So getting kind of that early momentum and doing it where Clint is probably just going to be in the 18 and probably just get like minutes as the third sub. If they can make that statement without him, then, that kind of wakes up a few people and it wakes up the own team, because they can have that confidence and know, hey, we were without one of our starting 11, one of our 2 or 3 best players by far, and we just handled the chance. That'd be a great way to wake up on Sunday morning for them.
All right, last couple of questions here. As again, 2 days before kickoff, hosting Sporting Kansas City. I'm sure the crowd will be massive. The noise will be amazing, and it's a chance for Seattle to sort of say, "Look, we're real again. We're coming at you again. We have a chance to win this thing." I want to know from you first, before we get to predictions, who's going to be the biggest offseason acquisition for this team over the course of the entire year?
Chad Marshall.
Okay.
And he's a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, faded a little bit due to concussion worries and the fact that the crew have been awful. But if they get the Chad Marshall that Siggy Schmidt played with, coached back in his crew days, Seattle goes from having a pretty good defense that was basically Osvaldo Alonso and then guys doing well to an extraordinary defense that it would be difficult to break down. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to give you a second. It's actually Kenny Cooper.
Okay.
Because if Kenny Cooper has one of those partner with Thierry Henry kind of years, with Obafemi and Clint Dempsey pulling defenses away, then he's going to get 10-plus goals. And in a season for Seattle, if they get Kenny Cooper with 10-plus goals and he's the third scorer, that's a heck of an attack.
And where does this team finish? You're obviously biased. It's fine. But where does this team finish in 2014?
I'm going to give you ranges. It's going to be a top 3 team in the West, and we'll be in the Western Conference semifinals. Or not semifinals. Let's go Western Conference finals.
Fine. MLS
from there.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
From there, you're not going to make. All right, that's fair enough. I think that's deep enough. You've got them as one of the final 4.
Yeah, one of the final 4 in the league. They're going to go. I think they'll return to their Open Cup glory. They'll be in Champions League for 2015.
There you go, Dave Clark from Sounder at Heart. That is the Seattle Sounders blog over at SB Nation. One of the best. Been reading Dave's stuff for how long has Sounder at Heart been around, Dave?
August of 2008.
August of 2008. So you started your blog a couple months before I started mine, and it's outlasted it by years now. So congratulations on all of that, Dave. I appreciate your time, man.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Talk to you.
All right. Bye-bye. 10 minutes left in the show. Phone line's still open, 347-756-6276. MLS predictions from me will probably land tomorrow. I've written my share of previews. I've thought about this a little bit. I'm having some issues shaking out just where I think teams will land, especially in the bottom half or bottom 2/3 of the Eastern Conference. The West is a little bit more of a clear favorite. Portland is a clear favorite. I mean, sorry, not a clear favorite. We've got clear favorites in both conferences, Sporting and Portland. It's after that it starts to get just a little bit murky. And there's enough change and turnover and new storylines all over the place. I'm really not sure. How good is Toronto FC going to be? Is it too much to see them jump all the way into a playoff spot? I mean, look, 5 out of 10 teams, 5 out of 9? Which one has 10? Whatever. 5 teams make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. So you would think that that's really not that high of a bar. And yet, you look at how difficult the Eastern Conference is going to be, how much parity is involved. New England, Philadelphia, Toronto, Columbus is going to be better. Trust me. Montreal, maybe not. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's any clear division there. So perhaps I'll put myself on the line, make some predictions tomorrow. Last thing I want to talk about today is I think we need to start a war around here. Now, not the bad kind of war. Nobody actually gets hurt. We need to start a war. And this is where this spawns from. Nike released the U.S. soccer shirt. We've talked about this. Some people get very much upset about a bad jersey. Not upset. It's boring. It's fine. Whatever. Saw it yesterday against Ukraine. It's white. It's white. That's what it is. You can either love it, hate it, or be ambivalent the way I am. I don't care what they're wearing as long as they play well. But the response to the jersey and the fact it was called a golf shirt by so many people on Twitter spawned a further response. This is from John Holmes at PGA.com, the Professional Golfers Association website. He says, U.S. Soccer and Nike unveiled the uniforms that the U.S. men's national team will wear at the World Cup this summer. It's also the women's team. In Rio de Janeiro, as well as in other matches. Haters began instantly hating on the jerseys because they look like the horror golf shirts. He then goes on to quote a couple of people, including Brooks Peck from Dirty Tackle, Andrew Doss from the New York Times, talking about this being a golf shirt. He talks about Deadspin, calling it a golf shirt. And he says, as a longtime and dedicated golf shirt wearer, I have to laugh at all this. Golf shirts are great. They're comfortable, versatile, and good looking. And many of the modern versions are so awesome that they actively help keep you cool and comfy, even when it's stinking hot outside. As far as I'm concerned, the only bad golf shirt is the one I don't have yet. He then goes on to say he might buy one. He provides the link, the Nike link to buy it. And then he mentions Ryder Cup shirts, which are way worse. In when they played the Ryder Cup in Boston, or up in that area, whatever that golf course was, you remember it was like they were wearing like shirts with like portraits of people or something, like paintings. I don't know. What was going on with that? I am like the most casual golf fan on the planet. I will watch the majors. That's it. But I think like he's getting upset because we've called it a golf shirt. Golf is getting hated on by soccer fans. Come on, man. What's wrong with calling it a golf shirt? So we need to foster this animosity between golf and soccer. All in good fun, tongue in cheek, but whatever. Because clearly soccer fans aren't golf fans. I guess that's the case. Because if you call it a golf shirt and you mean that as a derogatory statement, then what are you saying? Golf shirts are hideous? Golf shirts are ugly? They're not attractive in any way? Take offense, golf people. Come on, bring it. Let's fight. Call me up. Tell me how much better golf is than soccer. I'd love to have that conversation. Let's go. I haven't played golf in years. That's it's one of those sports. The most expensive sport on the planet to play. All right. Coming down the home stretch, we've talked USA, Ukraine. Not a good performance. Nobody really made their case to get on the roster for the World Cup in 2014. Other international results from last night, from yesterday. Clearly you had Mexico, Nigeria drawing in Atlanta, the big game in this country. You had Portugal demolishing Cameroon. Was that right? 5-1? 5-1. Portugal beat Cameroon. Now, as an American fan, does that send you into a panic? The Portugal destroyed Cameroon 5-1 because friendlies matter and we really care about what those results are. Austria, Uruguay 1-1. Romania, Argentina, they played to a full-time draw. Brazil, South Africa, 5-0 for the Brazilians, and apparently the cutest pitch invasion of all time, Neymar and a youngster there in South Africa. Costa Rica beat Paraguay 2-1. Joel Campbell and Alvaro Saborio. Good stuff there. Honduras beat Venezuela 2-1. Jerry Bankston scored. Spain beat Italy 1-0. I flipped by that game. It was somewhere after the U.S. maybe. Portugal, Cameroon, there's the one I mentioned, 5-1. Cristiano Ronaldo scored twice for the Portuguese. He's the guy. Got to stop him. France beat the Netherlands 2-0. Benzema, and I haven't seen the goal. I haven't seen the second goal yet, but I keep seeing that it's amazing. I need to go watch this goal. Apparently, I need to do better about watching goal highlights. I see them, and I'm like, I'm going to go watch that later. I'm putting that on my to-do list, my mental to-do list, and then I forget to go back and click on it. I forget to go back and click on the link to watch, and then I get on the show, and I'm like, I haven't seen this. Is it Matuidi? I have no idea. Australia lost to Ecuador 4-3 after being up 3-0. Tim Cahill scored twice. They were up 3-0. Gave up a goal, got a red card, and lost 4-3. All right. Wales beat Iceland. Nobody cares about that one. Neither one of those teams in the World Cup. Sorry, people of Wales and Iceland. Rest of these. I'm just going through this. Ivory Coast beat Belgium 2-2. Or tied Belgium 2-2. Excuse me. Those are two teams to watch out for, obviously, at the World Cup. Drogba scored. Fellaini scored. Belgium. We're going to talk a lot about Belgium leading up to the World Cup. Trevor, are you thumbs up or thumbs down on Belgium being a team to make some noise? Because the tide is starting to turn. People are starting to turn on Belgium. I'm seeing this now. People are saying Belgium is going to underwhelm at the World Cup. It wasn't too long ago Belgium was everybody's dark horse candidate to either win the thing or make it to the final. It's fascinating to watch how these, for no real reason, by the way. Just this very sort of, nebulous, well, maybe this player is not in good form. What is Lukaku doing right now? Well, Fellaini's struggling, and, it doesn't really add all up to, well, now we're going to downgrade Belgium from dark horse candidate to win it all to, well, they might get out of their group. Well, they're probably going to get out of their group, and there's a very good chance the United States, if they get out of their group, will play Belgium. So we'll be able to see how that plays out. There you go. Reminder, if you do the iTunes thing, even if you don't get the show from iTunes and listen to it through iTunes, go give us a rating and a review. I know you have to sign up and have your name and password and stuff, but it's not that hard, and it helps us out a lot. Please. Oh, I did see this. I saw the GIF earlier. Thank you, Philip Foos. I did see the goal, the Matuidi goal. Very nice. Ratings and reviews on iTunes help us out a lot. You can get the show at nasn.tv as well. We're on Stitcher. We're on TuneIn. We have our own Android app. Go find that. We will be in touch with everybody who helped out with the Indiegogo stuff. We're really starting to get pushing towards involving those people who are going to be co-hosts or need to pull together a set list for me. I mean, a playlist for me for the music. All of that stuff coming up. Send us email, show@soccermorning.com, jason@nasn.tv. Davis JSN is my Twitter handle. And thank you very much to one Mr. Dave Clark for coming on and talking about the Seattle Sounders. 2 days till the MLS season starts. 2 days until my wife really, really starts to hate me. There you go. All right. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Friday. It's Friday tomorrow. Bye.